Lots of upsets as we conclude week 7 and transition into week 8 of the 2023 NFL season. This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright with Chris Costich, and we have a great show planned for you guys tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the Patriots, how they beat the Bills in a shocking upset. A couple of other ones as well, the 49ers losing to the Vikings on Monday Night Football, the Dolphins to the Eagles. The Ravens destroyed the Lions 38-6. And joining us to cover all of these topics, we have special guest and content creator of the Fantasy Football Expert Instagram page, Ari Koslow. Ari, thank you so much for joining the show. For some of our new listeners, why don't you reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I run at fantasy.footballexpert on Instagram. I've been running it since 2015, so quite some time now. And I've kind of grown it, over the past 8 years or so to a pretty good community. So, excited to be on here today.
Yeah, it's been great. And from following your show, your page, I think what I like most about it is you're not afraid to branch off to other sports as well that are kind of trending. So if it's March Madness, if it's, the MLB as well, I've noticed you post some Mariners stuff. You kind of go based on what is trending, not simply just fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a fantasy account, but I know a lot of us are into all different kinds of sports, as am I. And so I do try to mix other sports in a little bit, mostly, more so on my stories than, actual posts for the most part. But just to kind of, because I'm, not just a fantasy football fan, but, all sports and all of that. So I think it's kind of fun to mix it in and talk about, other sports.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we're going to get right into it. So leading off, we're going to talk about the Patriots. They hosted the Buffalo Bills as home underdogs and pulled off a shocking upset. 29-25. This is the Bills' second loss out of the last 3 games. And the one that they won was they barely hung on against, I believe it was off the top of my head, it was the Giants. Correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my takeaway here is on the Buffalo Bills. So, I mean, the way that the Patriots just gashed that Bills defense consistently throughout this game tells me they are really missing some key pieces. Tre'Davious White and Matt Milano most notably, but this is a team that is really hurting, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And without them to make up for some of Josh Allen's turnovers, that is going to be a problem. So I wonder just how far this Bills team is going to make it. But Ari, I'll hand it off to you. What do you think about just your basic takeaways on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird season for the Bills. Week 1, they had the loss against the Jets where they lost Aaron Rodgers. Allen threw, I think it was 2 or 3 interceptions. And, people were a little bit concerned to a degree about the Bills. Then they rip off 3 wins in a row, capped off with the win over the Dolphins. I think that was the 1 week after they scored 70 points. and then after that, you had the London loss against the Jaguars, which, London, all that travel, you can kind of take that how you want. But then, barely hanging on against the Giants where they had the ball at like the 1 yard line, at the last second. And then now this loss. So it's been, a really up and down season for a Bills team that obviously many people had, as a top 2 or 3 Super Bowl contender heading into the season. You mentioned injuries on the defense, obviously playing a part in the struggles, but it's also been, inconsistency on the offense as well with Josh Allen and the passing game. They've gotten a little bit more, I feel like, from the running game with James Cook than what they got last year. We're seeing Josh Allen run less a little bit, which, has been notable for fantasy football in particular. But, I still think that they are a top 3 to 4 team in the AFC, despite, the up and down to this point in the season. but definitely consistency has been a problem for this team, to this point in the season, no matter who the opponent has been.
Yeah, certainly consistency is a good way to put it with this Bills team. And you could have been able to make that case in the past few years with the Bills. Now the final product when you look at the regular season as a whole in those couple of seasons, it looks really good. Allen's probably still going to throw 30 plus touchdowns. They're probably still going to win 11 to 12 games. But putting it into context and where they exit in the playoffs, it's not as good as it might look. But Chris, what do you think?
Well, you know me, I'm not a big Bills defender. I'll never be a Josh Allen defender. His turnovers have always been a problem for him. Obviously, most turnovers since he got into the league out of anyone. His first throw of the game was an interception, and they threw a fact out there during the game. It was the third time in his career that he's thrown an interception on the first play of the game. I don't know. For some reason, the Bills just love to make it harder for themselves, much like the Pats. And I've never been a big believer in the Bills at all, really. They've always had Josh Allen's turnover problems, just him being too aggressive. Yeah, he's not running the ball as much, which is good because takes a little load off his shoulders, makes him less injury, whatever you want to call it, more liable for injury, or less. I'm going to backtrack. It makes him less liable for injury there. And they're starting to get James Cook more involved, which is nice. But that's always been like the key thing for them is that they never really had a run game. It's always revolved around Josh Allen. And that's when you put the entire game in your quarterback's hands, it can go one or two ways. It'll go either really well or it'll go really bad. And a lot of times it's gone really bad. And another part of this is that the Bills aren't really playing that great of football. Excuse me. They aren't playing that great of football in the first half. Put up 0 against the Giants in the first half. They put up 3 against the Pats in the first half. You can't be a one-half football team in this league because then you'll have games like this where the Patriots will still have time on the clock to come back and beat you, or a slow start, or it probably won't even get to that point where the Bills will have a slow start and won't catch up entirely. Yeah. Will the Bills still be a playoff team? Yeah. They won't be a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion, especially with the problems that they have on defense and especially the way that the Patriots manhandled them on offense. Mac Jones, only 5 incompletions. This was the Mac Jones redemption game right here, by all means necessary. And the Bill Belichick redemption game. You kidding me? And when that report came out that Belichick was quietly signed to that extension, a lucrative extension, all of Pat's Nation was freaking out, including myself. I was thinking, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? What was that?
I said I'm still freaking out because I don't know if I want him on this team anymore.
Yeah, and he comes out and they get a great win over Buffalo, a win that they haven't had in 2 years. And that was when Mac Jones threw the ball 3 times. And now you have a game where now you've proven you can beat the Bills on the back of Mac Jones. And they're starting to actually get their skill guys involved. They're getting Kendrick Bourne the ball. They're actually using Pop Douglas. I'd love to see them use Bootsy a little bit more, but they're actually getting guys involved now finally, which has been a huge problem. Is that a huge problem, in my opinion, for the Pats, that they have too many mouths to feed. You have a lot of great young talent, but it's just a matter of how often you're going to be able to distribute the ball. Sorry, I've kind of gone away from the Bills because that was the main talking point. But looking at the Pats' schedule, they could potentially be 6-7 or 7-6 and maybe sniffing at a wild card spot in the coming days, coming up to the Monday night game against Kansas City.
Sure.
So
So the way I would look at the Patriots, I'm glad you brought them up because then we can briefly touch on them as well. Um, I'll say this: any given Sunday, right? Anybody can on any given Sunday can have an incredible game and just pull off a wild upset. What makes a great team is being able to string those together consistently. And until I see that from this Patriots team, I thought they could potentially going into this season be a playoff team. Now I don't see it. Now, if they win, I'll give you this: if they win against Miami, next week, game on. Game on. If they go over and beat back-to-back teams that are projected to be in the playoffs, then I'll take it. Okay. Then the schedule gets a little softer, and suddenly those teams, the Commanders of the world, right? The Colts, they seem a lot more beatable to you now, and you can actually see them sneaking into the playoffs at 9-8, 10-7. That's something that we can see. But we got to see that at some point. We need, it's a big if at this point. And
well, that's what I mean, Adam, is that even if they beat the Dolphins and they can string together these wins against Washington, Indy, New York, the Giants, the Chargers, the Steelers, up until that Monday night game against KC, if they can string some wins together, even if they take a loss to Miami, they could still be sitting looking at the wild card spot at 6-7. That's not out of the realm of impossibility. Granted, you still got Buffalo and New York the last 2 games of the season, and you also have Denver, which should be a beatable game or a winnable game. But, I'm trying not to sound like a delusional Pats fan here, but
you sound like a delusional Pats fan.
No, the delusional Pats fan will say that we'll win out.
Okay, yeah, that's delusional.
I'll be a realist and say that, yeah, the Pats entirely have the possibility of being 7-6 or 6-7, but like you said, it's any given Sunday, so the Pats could just as easily not be 6-7 or 7-6 come that Monday night game against KC. Anything can happen.
It's not any given Sunday if they're winning every Sunday. At that point, you're just a good football team.
Yeah, that point you're just a good football team. But what I'm trying to say, it's not out of the realm of impossibility out of the realm of impossibility if they can play the way they played against the Bills. They actually gave Mac Jones time in the pocket.
They did.
And it gave him time to actually get rid of the football. And surprisingly enough, according to Next Gen Stats, Mac Jones, his average snap to throw was 2.4 seconds, second quickest in the NFL up to this point. And that's because he actually has time to actually look downfield, step into his throw. I don't even think did he get sacked once?
I have not seen that. You can check if you'd like. In the meantime,
Mac Jones got sacked once. He got sacked once.
Okay. I have no complaints from the Patriots this past Sunday. I really don't. I'm saying, okay, let's see it a few more times. That's all. But I do want to throw it to Ari to get his thoughts in, because it's just been you and I talking about this topic.
Sorry.
But what do you think about this? Which side are you leaning towards?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great performance, especially from their defense. And then, obviously with Mac, it's just about not committing those, the turnovers is the biggest problem for him, I think, from what I have seen. But yeah, I mean, I can't say that I'm a total believer in the Patriots over this one game, but with the way the Dolphins secondary is banged up, if the Patriots can give him time against the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins offense will still be a little bit too much, in the end. But if they can even just be competitive in the game and keep it, within 10 points, give or take, something like that. I don't know their entire schedule, after that, but I think this upcoming game against the Dolphins would be another tough test, obviously divisional game that will tell a lot more about, their chances of maybe having any chance of sniffing the wild card, come later in the season.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all can stand in agreement that it's going to come down to their offensive line. Their offensive line has been putrid this year, even when it's been healthy. But if they can put things together and give Mac Jones some time, then sure, they will have a chance. But I also think it goes a little deeper than that. So we'll have to just see how things play out with that. But none of it matters if they can't fix their offensive line. So with that being said, I would like to move on. So we're going to talk a couple of upsets, potential fraud alert. So Dolphins losing to the Eagles on Sunday Night Football, and the 49ers losing to the Vikings. Speaking of the Vikings, do they have a potential chance to make the playoffs? That's all next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins! Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright, Chris Costich, special guest Ari Koslow. So the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Miami Dolphins 31-17 in a showdown that we thought was going to be a much more competitive game. And don't look now, but it's been well over a year since the Dolphins have beaten a team that is over 500. Which is hard to believe because during that stretch of time, we have looked at this Miami Dolphins team as a contender during that time. Besides, the time that Tua's been hurt, but they've been a very competitive football team. So the Eagles absolutely showed them up. Jalen Hurts, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. He ran for a touchdown as well. What are we thinking about this matchup? Do you guys think that we have oversold the Dolphins at all? Ari, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think, like you said, with the win over 500, teams over 500, I think they have, a little bit more to prove in terms of being a legit, Super Bowl contender. But I think, to me, this is more about the Eagles showing out than it is the Dolphins, being frauds or whatever you want to call it. The Dolphins are still, both teams were banged up in the secondary. Obviously, the Eagles offense put it on them, but, Tyreek Hill had that drop that would have been a touchdown that could have made the game a little bit closer. But yeah, to me, it's more about the Eagles being impressive than it is the Dolphins, fading or whatever you want to call it. There was the one bad interception by Tua where he just threw it up and they could have gotten the field goal if he just threw it away. But my biggest takeaway was just the Eagles, being the clear favorite in the NFC, especially, we'll get into Monday night game. After what we saw Monday night, the Eagles being the clear favorite out of the NFC.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you, Ari. I definitely think that is more the Eagles. Like it was their day. They had their way with the Dolphins all day. You also had Tyreek missing that touchdown, like you said. There's a lot of missed calls too, which Mike McDaniel went on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, afterward, literally like the night after or the day after, and just aired his grievances, attacked the NFL for paying attention to the Swifties more than the actual officiating. But I digress. The Dolphins, their wins this year, the Patriots, the Broncos, the Giants, the Panthers. Who are the two games or the two teams they've lost to? The Bills and the Eagles. What are those teams? What are the difference between those teams? The Bills and the Eagles are contenders. The other teams probably won't sniff any sort of playoff contention. The Patriots obviously being a divisional opponent. Now, if they beat the Chiefs in London in 2 weeks, we could be having a different story. They're back. They aren't fraudulent, but the problem is that the Dolphins, it's not to say that they're a bad team. Obviously, they're this is a historic offense we're talking about here. And yeah, they're dealing with injuries on the defensive side, but it's still a team that's going to beat up on the bad teams. But when they face up against good teams, it's kind of which Dolphins team are you going to get? Are you going to get the Dolphins team that's going to put up 70 on the Broncos, or are you going to get the Dolphins team that loses by 21 or 28 to the Bills? I don't know. It's one of those things that you can't really get a gist of till you get to the middle of the season. And for the middle of the season for the Dolphins, it's going to be the Chiefs. And that's going to be their big test because obviously Mahomes is going to be Mahomes. The Chiefs are going to do – they're just going to do their thing. And the Chiefs defense, surprisingly, is actually very good this year too. They're the fourth best defense in the league. First, out of nowhere. Last week I just got done saying how they've always been a suspect defense. Throw that out the window because they're here to play. They finally have a defense that, granted, they didn't necessarily need a great defense to win the Super Bowl, but now they have a defense and not as good of an offense, but with Pat Mahomes as your quarterback, they're still going to be a contender for or probably going to be in the Super Bowl regardless. And that's just something that we're going to have to accept. Back to the Dolphins real quick. Dolphins, I just don't know if they'll be a Super Bowl contender unless they can just figure it out and get some wins against some good teams, which I think that they can, but it depends on if they can get healthy on the defensive end again.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with you on the Dolphins. And it's not even necessarily Tua's fault. He doesn't have that good of an offensive line. The offensive line isn't very good, and it was evident in this matchup. Despite them being, they were facing one of the best front sevens in all of football, but you still got to give your quarterback a chance. He got sacked 3 times in this matchup. That's a problem. So if he's pressured every other play, then you're not giving your quarterback the best chance to find the Tyreek Hills and the Jalen Waddles of the world. So they have to be better with their offensive line. I was a little disappointed with what they did this offseason to fix their offensive line, which had issues on the right side. I mean, Austin Jackson can't stay healthy. They can't really do much with Teron Armstead. They took their best shot they could, and he can't stay healthy either. But they have some problems on that offensive line that I wanted them to fix, and they haven't. That being said, I tend to agree. I think the Dolphins will be a playoff team, but once they run into anyone like the Eagles or, anyone like that in the AFC, the Chiefs per se, you could say the Ravens, the Bengals, if they figure it out, if they run into them, they may have some issues. Also the Jaguars. Jaguars are a team that's up and coming. And they're figuring things out on offense as they continue to go. So this Dolphins team, they've looked good, but every time they run into someone good, they lose. That's the problem.
Yeah,
do what you do against what you did against Denver every week against good teams. Be battle tested. That's my problem.
Yeah, and go back on your offensive line point too. That the big thing is that one of the biggest things that the Dolphins have had, obviously speed, is the speed of their running game as well. And they only had 45 yards on the ground. This team isn't meant to go head to head. It's not a team that's meant to be physical. It's a team that's meant to be fast. They're going to beat you with speed. But, the Eagles are a team that's meant to beat the living hell out of you. And, they made sure that they weren't going to get beat by the Dolphins' speed. And that's all you really have to do. The Eagles basically showed us how to beat the Dolphins. Just beat the hell out of them physically and don't let them beat you with their speed. And that's what happened.
You're right. All right. I want to briefly, we're in a decent spot with time, but I want to touch on the 49ers losing to the Vikings on Monday Night Football, because that's a big one. Not only did the 49ers lose in an upset last week to the Browns starting PJ Walker, but now they just lost to the Vikings with Kirk Cousins. So I wanted to pull up but I wanted to first touch on the Vikings here. I wanted to pull up their schedule because their schedule in the next month and a half is actually disgusting. First, next week, you are visiting Green Bay. Then you have the Falcons, then the Saints, then the Broncos, then the Bears, then the Raiders again. Then you have the Bengals. That's going to be a tough one if the Bengals are healthy, but they've been iffy this year. You have the Lions, which is a tough one. Packers, which I think should be a victory as well. Then you have the Lions again. So you have you have the Lions twice and the Bengals. Those are three that I think will probably be losses. But don't look now, but this team does look like it has a path to go to make the playoffs, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that they could definitely end up being 6-4, 7-3 in this last stretch coming up. Obviously, you pick out the Packers twice, the Falcons, Saints, Broncos. I think they can rattle off all these games that are the next 4 weeks and get themselves onto a 6-game win streak and get themselves into that playoff conversation. And my only problem is defense, and I'd say defense in the run game. Vikings defense is like middle of the pack right now in terms of yards. Vikings defense hasn't necessarily been the greatest, especially this year. And they've also had to rely on Kirk throwing the ball 35 to 40 times a game, with, on top of that, their run game not doing a ton. Granted, they did have a pretty solid day on the ground, 74 yards, but that's on 18 attempts from Madison Akers, and the rest is just focusing on throwing the ball around. So I think that the Vikings definitely could, but they're just too much of a one-dimensional team to really make a run. But that doesn't mean that Kirk Cousins is not a top 10 quarterback.
It's not a top.
He is a top 10 quarterback. He is a top 10 quarterback.
It's not top 10.
Yes.
Ari, what are your thoughts on the Vikings here?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly an impressive performance on Monday, especially from the defense and the offensive line, keeping Cousins really upright. He got sacked 0 times against that Niners pass rush. And then, it's still too early to look at, playoff standings and all that. But I mean, the NFC is going to be, wide open in that wild card kind of race in that 5 to 7 range. I still think the Lions, despite their performance this past Sunday, they still are, the clear team to beat in the division. I think they're still going to win the division. But when you're looking at the wild card spots, I mean, it's too early, but they're a half game right now behind the last wild card spot right now. And you talked about their, favorable schedule with a lot of matchups that are very winnable. So, and then obviously, you have the likely return of Justin Jefferson kind of in the week 10 to 12 range, in that range. So definitely this win was huge for a lot of different reasons for them, for this season.
Definitely. I wanted to touch on the 49ers now. So again, as I introduced this portion of the segment, back-to-back losses, not exactly against good teams, right? So here we are. We're looking at this 49ers team. They're 5-2, so they're still in a good spot playoff-wise. You have the Seahawks hot on their heels right now, who are currently sitting at 4-2. And Brock Purdy looks human the past couple of weeks. After a 10-0 start to his regular season career, and I believe it was 2 playoff wins, 1 or 2. He got a couple of them. He got him to the NFC Championship.
1, yeah.
Okay, 1. Didn't know off the top of my head.
Or no, it was 2 because they didn't have the 1 seed last year.
Did they? I thought they had the 1 seed.
No, because they
No,
were in,
the Eagles had
Philly.
it. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, they were in
Oh, yeah,
Philly.
they beat the Seahawks in the wild card round. Yeah, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, your Seahawks are in a better spot than our Patriots, though. Look, me personally, I'm not ready to hop off the bandwagon of the 49ers. They've showed out very nicely, and Brock Purdy has shown me that he can be a very good quarterback. And honestly, I didn't hate his performance against the Browns. It was against one of the best defenses in the league, and he did get his team into field goal position. He got him there. It's not his fault that the kicker missed the 42-yard field goal. This performance was a little worse, but at the same time, every quarterback is going to have bad stretches. I don't think we can hold it against Brock Purdy that suddenly he's not a very good quarterback just because he had a couple bad performances in a row. Everyone does it. Tom Brady's done it. Peyton Manning's had bad stretches. All of the greats have had bad stretches for a certain amount of time. We let Justin Herbert off the hook all the time. So why are we not giving Brock Purdy the benefit of the doubt suddenly? Right?
I'll definitely give him the benefit of the doubt.
I would give it some time. If he's this bad for this long, for let's say the rest of the season, okay, then we have to start having that conversation that maybe it's all the talent around him. But two things can be true at once. He may have good talent around him, but he could also still be a very good quarterback, right?
Yeah. I think the only problem is that he's got the whole Mr. Irrelevant thing hanging over his head, and that's probably what's going to turn a lot of people off at that point, especially when you have two really bad mistakes that turn into interceptions in the last 5 minutes of the game. That's the huge problem here is that we're forgetting about, is that the two interceptions he had were the last 5 minutes of the game, and that's crucial. And on top of that, the Niners are missing Debo very badly right now. Debo, we're now seeing how much of an effect he has on this offense, especially in the way that they actually move the ball too. Like I said, Vikings are middle of the pack. They're still not that great of a defense. The Niners should have had their way with this Vikings defense last week. I'll give them a pass because it's the Browns, but this week they should have had their way, especially with or without Debo, and they didn't. They couldn't move the ball sufficiently.
Yeah, everything you say is true. Everything you say I agree with. All I'm saying is this is such a small sample size to be saying that this 49ers team is fraudulent. This team is not going to be in contention. They're still a good team. And they had a bad stretch. I mean, it happens to a lot of great teams. Remember the 2019 Chiefs during a stretch? They couldn't beat some really middling teams. But they figured it out. They got healthy. And they went on to win the freaking Super Bowl. And their quarterback won Super Bowl MVP. So everyone just has tough stretches for a certain amount of time. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but let's proceed with caution here. But Ari, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they're still a great team, obviously. I think while they were missing Debo, I think missing Trent Williams was just as big, if not bigger, especially on that left side of the line that was getting quite a bit of pressure. But Brandon Ayuk had a pretty good first half, and I don't think he had one catch in the second half. So they also were missing that kind of game breaker that Debo brings them. And then we saw the secondary can be exploited if their pass rush isn't getting to the quarterback. When we talk about how great the defense is for San Francisco and how hard at hitting they are and all that, but I mean it really is mostly their pass rush that creates all that kind of chaos that makes the defense look that good. So I think and then we saw at the end of the first half, the all-out blitz with 7 seconds left with no timeouts left was obviously also a questionable call that's, calling a lot of 49ers fans having question with Steve Wilks, as their defensive coordinator and all of that. But, I mean, yeah, like you guys said, it's a tough stretch. They're still a great team. They do have a big game against the Bengals next week, which, if they can get back on track heading to the bye, it would obviously be big. I mean, it's only one game difference of being 5-3 versus 6-2 heading into the bye, losing 3 in a row versus, getting back on the winning ways, obviously is a pretty big deal. And then they have Jacksonville, I think, out of the bye, which is another relatively, tough game. So they're definitely going to be kind of battle tested in that regard, with this tough stretch. But, all in all, they have too much talent not to still be, one of the best teams in the NFC and even in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's going to be a fun matchup to watch is 49ers Bengals, because the Bengals are going to be coming off a bye. They will be well rested, and hopefully that means Joe Burrow's calf is going to be closer to 100%. And suddenly the Niners are a wounded animal, and they're going to be defending their playoff, not playoff hopes, but Super Bowl contending hopes, and their chances at getting a high seed against this Bengals team who's also fighting in the same breath. So that's going to be a fun matchup to watch, and it's going to have it. I bet it will have some major playoff implications for both sides, given the magnitude and what is on the line for both sides. All right, I want to move on. We are a little bit against the clock. I'll put it up to a vote. For next segment, do we want to touch on trivia or do we want to touch on the Ravens in their loss, in their victory? Jesus.
I mean, the only thing really to talk about for the Ravens is their receivers are actually somewhat good.
And they blew doors.
They blew doors. Lions, I think this is just going to be a one-off loss. Or
Lions are going to be fine, to be honest.
They're going to be fine. This is just one game.
Have you seen the Lions?
That we were just talking.
Have you seen the Lions schedule coming up?
I actually have not.
It's also disgusting. You could see 2 games where they actually will probably lose, and they might have one other where they mess up. But it looks like it's actually disgusting.
They're going to have a little bit of problems at the wide receiver spot. As of 12 minutes ago, via Ian Rappaport, Lions receiver Marvin Jones Jr. steps away from his team to tend to personal family matters, and he was out for the last week too.
Okay, but you have Josh Reynolds, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Jameson Williams. I think you're set there. And that other kid, Laporta. Holy crap, did that guy just come out of nowhere? I thought they made a mistake trading TJ Hawkinson, but they found this diamond in the rough in this young kid. He's doing really well.
Them Iowa boys. They're good.
Let me go through it real quick, and then we'll go on to the next segment, which will be trivia. Their next game, Raiders, then the Chargers, then the Bears, Packers, Saints, Bears again, Broncos, Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings again. There's like 2 games that they lose. They could roll out of bed and win 12, 13 games.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably just add in an extra loss just because
mistakes happen.
Football.
It's football any given Sunday. So they win 12 games this year. What do you think, Ari?
Yeah, I agree.
Ari, you got anything out of that?
I agree. I think I mentioned earlier with the Vikings and the Lions are still, this is still the clear favorite in the division. And yeah, I agree. It was a one-off game, and I think they're going to take out their anger on the Raiders Monday night and, pick up a convincing win to get back on track.
Absolutely. All right. Next, we have Chris's trivia segment. Most turnovers since 2018. That's going to be fun. Stay tuned for that. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast. I'm Adam Wright with Chris Costich and Ari Koslow. All right, so we have reached the trivia segment of our show. So, Chris, what do you got?
Trivia for today: most turnovers by an NFL player since 2018. Looking at the top 5 players, so we'll just go back and forth. Since there's 5, it's just 3 out of 5. Whoever gets the 3 first wins. Ari, since you're our guest, I'll let you go first.
I mean, you mentioned him earlier, and I think that was his rookie year in 2018. Josh Allen.
Yep, Josh Allen, 89 turnovers since 2018. Didn't mention him earlier in this episode. He's number 1.
That's why you did this topic.
Maybe.
You were just looking at a way to trash on Josh Allen. I like it. I like it though.
Maybe.
All right. Give me Lamar Jackson.
Lamar's not on the list. He's like barely even top 20.
Oh yeah, because he's missed a lot of games too.
Missed a lot of games, and there was his MVP season. He only had like 6 interceptions.
That is right.
Ari, your turn.
Yeah, Ari.
I'm not sure if he's made enough starts recently, but Jameis Winston.
Not Jameis Winston. He is in the top 15 though.
That was going to be my next guess. Let me think. I've got to go with who gets a lot of turnovers. And who's been around for a little while. Give me Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins is number 5.
Ha! There you go.
79 turnovers since 2018.
Okay.
So 1-1. Ari, you're up.
Baker Mayfield.
It's number 4. 82 turnovers since 2018. And I'll always be a Baker Mayfield believer, but yeah, I think most of those turnovers were also from his rookie year as well. I remember he was racking up some interceptions that season. But 2-1, Ari with the lead. Adam, your turn.
Give me Justin Herbert.
Who?
Justin Herbert.
He's not on the list. Sorry, my mic or my earbud cut out when you made your guess, but he's not on the list. Wasn't around long enough.
Yeah, that's right. He only came in at, 2020?
Yeah.
Jared Goff.
Jared Goff is number 2. So Ari takes the win.
All right. What was the last one?
Well, you guys can keep trying to guess the last one if you want.
I don't really feel like it, but I was gonna say Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones is top 10.
Okay.
But the last player that we were looking for was Derek Carr. He's number 3.
That would have been a good one. Okay.
Yeah. Derek Carr with 83 turnovers. Jared Goff had 84 turnovers. So, yeah. I'm surprised about Jared Goff, actually. Not going to lie.
Yeah, Goff has been a stable quarterback. I know he's thrown some picks, but
I was just thinking just how pass heavy he's kind of been in a lot of the offenses and just mostly volume based.
Yeah, especially with the Rams too. Like McVay likes to spread it out a lot.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right. There you have it. And for our next segment, do we want to go right into it? We don't need to play the intro.
Yeah, just go right into it.
Want to touch on your top 3, bottom 3? You can take control of the banners here for that one.
Yeah, so top 3, bottom 3 for week 7. I had this was probably the toughest week for me, not gonna lie. I felt like there was a lot of good candidates for each for the top and the bottom. But we'll get right into it. Top 3. Patriots. Obviously a great win against the Bills. Think that it's definitely getting them into the right direction of where they want to be and potentially getting to maybe a wild card spot, but probably won't happen. But regardless, for morale's sake, it's a good win. Ravens, great win. They finally figured out their whole wide receiver stick. Zay Jones, rookie wide receiver. He's a dog. Jesus Christ. There's a fly that keeps flying around me. Sorry. Eagles. that's just a great dominant win for the Eagles, in my opinion. And they just had their way with the Dolphins all day, proving that they're still a top 2 team in the NFC. Honorable mention, the Vikings and the Bears. The Bears just having their way with the Raiders. Especially with the backup quarterback too. I can't think of what his name is right now. Bad, not wasn't the greatest game from him. He only had 162 yards, but in terms of getting a job done, he had 3 total touchdowns on the game and doing enough to get a win, a blowout win, nonetheless, against a Raiders team that is kind of hot, but not anymore. Vikings, obviously, their win last night against the 49ers.
Tyson Bagent. He had one throwing touchdown, and I believe that was actually it. But they won with a D2 quarterback, so you get what you get.
True. What do you guys think, though, before we move on to the bottom 3?
I think you nailed it, honestly. I think this was a good one. Vikings won the game, but it didn't look too pretty. As for the Patriots, Ravens, and Eagles, they blew doors against great teams. So that's something to look at. In the Bears, when you win with a D2 quarterback, you're bound to at least sniff this list. So that's pretty good.
Ari, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have no disagreements. I mean, some teams like the Bears aren't going to be on this list very often, so you might as well put them on there, when you can. And then, the other teams obviously had pretty convincing wins against, playoff or even Super Bowl caliber teams. No disagreements from me.
Yeah, and some other ones that I had in mind too, the Browns, their shootout against the Colts. Another one was the Steelers. They're still looking like they could actually be a playoff team, even with Matt Canada as their OC, and they have Deontay Johnson back from injury as of last week, which is big for them. So those would probably be a couple other ones that I had in mind. Moving on to the bottom 3, though. 49ers, just a bad loss against the Vikings. We were just saying how it's probably just going to be one of those one-off losses that probably won't worry about too much. Same thing with the Lions. They're going to be just fine, especially with the schedule that they have coming up that we were just talking about. The Raiders, jeez. Can Josh McDaniels have any more horrible losses? Last year, you lose to Jeff Saturday, who in his first game as being a head coach, and you just get embarrassed by Jeff Saturday, who's just coming in all willy-nilly. And on top of that, last year as well, losing to Baker Mayfield, who joined the Rams on Tuesday and then beat him on Thursday. And then this weekend, you lose to a D2 quarterback in a bottom 2 team in the league. What is that? That's just unreal. And the craziest thing is that ever since he went 6-0 to start his coaching tenure with the Broncos way back when, he's had a horrific head coaching record. I can't believe that Josh McDaniels was even considered for a head coaching job to begin with, but that's neither here nor there. Honorable mention, the Bills. They're just bad right now. They'll probably end up being fine the rest of the way, but you never know with the Bills, especially with the injuries and how they can't perform in the first half right now. The Dolphins, just a bad loss. They just got the hell beat out of them by a very physical Eagles team. And maybe we see more teams try to just dominate them physically and not try to get beat by the speed. And that's probably going to be the Dolphins' downfall, is relying too much on the speed. Thoughts?
As for this list, the only issue that I would have is I know the Raiders lost with a D2 quarterback, which is why they deserve to be on this list, but as an honorable mention, because they're not a very good team either, and they're not even starting their current starting quarterback. Right now they have completely blanking on the name.
Brian Hoyer.
I forgot about that. Yeah, it was Brian Hoyer. I actually forgot about that.
The Bills, The Bills, on the other hand, they lost in an embarrassing matchup against a Patriots team that their own fans are calling to tank on the season on. So, like, I just think that's a much more embarrassing loss, and the Bills had much more to lose. I mean, they're now what? They're about 4-3, and they're now looking at barely being in there. I mean, they're going to make the playoffs most likely, but they're not going to get a top seed now. That's pretty much gone, mostly because of this loss to a team that you should be beating. And now we're going to be questioning whether or not you beat them the next time you face them, or if you can even beat the Dolphins the next time you face them, because you're losing these games that you should be winning.
No, I agree that the teams here are where they should be, but maybe Bills definitely had the worst loss, just given expectations and who they faced and who they had healthy and all of that. But other than that, I agree with the teams overall that are on here.
One other one that I took off last minute because of the Niners, and honestly, they could probably go in for the Raiders or any of these teams for that matter, is the Commanders only putting up 7 on the Giants. But
that'll do it. Yeah, that earns consideration at the very least.
Yeah, that was a tough one to take them out. But
the Giants aren't a terrible defense, but they're not a defense that's a Super Bowl winning defense, I would say.
Yeah, I was also thinking like that defense was probably moving off the momentum that they had against the Bills, only allowing the 14 points and allowing 0 first half points as well. But that's just one of those Commanders games that you don't know which Commanders team you're going to get. Yeah.
That is a great way to summarize the Commanders. You don't know which team you're going to get. They could go toe to toe with some of the best in 1 week and then lose in an embarrassment the next. What were you going to say, Ari?
I think he's frozen right now.
Is he frozen?
Yeah. One more thing I will say about the Commanders too is another reason why I had them even sniffing the list is they gave up 6 sacks for Sam Howell, and Sam Howell's not the problem. It's that O-line and just the whole team in general. And we were saying this the other week. Sam Howell leads the league in sacks taken. Like, that is just a problem.
Yeah, there's that. All right. We're going to have to move on to the next segment. I hope Ari finds... Oh, he's gone right now. All right. We'll see if he comes back. Actually, here he is. He's coming back. All right. I was going to say we would have to, because we have the guest segment next, we would have to...
Yeah, sorry. There's thunder and lightning, and I think the Wi-Fi cut out.
All right. No worries. Ooh.
Am I good?
I hope. Yeah. We can just hear echoes right now.
Is the sound not good on my end?
The sound on your end is fine. We can just hear ourselves. And I just hope that doesn't reflect on the broadcast.
I would say the time so you're not talking, have yourself muted so we don't hear the echo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. There we go. All right. So next we have Ari's guest segment. Fantasy football PSA for this time of year. A lot of teams struggling. A lot of team owners struggling right now and wondering, is it even worth it? So Ari has something on that. That's next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. We welcome you to the guest segment of our show, brought to you by Secret Weapon Consulting. So for our guest segment, we have Ari Koslow, who is the owner of the Instagram page known as the Fantasy Football Expert. He's going to talk about a little fantasy PSA that he goes over during this time of year when some teams are struggling to make the playoffs, all those fantasy owners. Ari, what do you got?
I just want to confirm, is there still the echo on your end?
Nope.
We don't have that. No,
Okay, great.
You're all set. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So obviously it's been kind of a crazy season. I mean, I guess I feel like we kind of say this every year with a lot of unpredictability and all of that, but a lot of teams struggling and some teams, having a good year so far. But if you're one of those teams that, is struggling, whether it's due to injuries or players underperforming, or, you got Kyle Bijan last week, let's say, where he didn't even, he saw one carry. Just to kind of always remember that fantasy football is, it's a long season, and not to kind of overreact for 1 week. If you're struggling, look at who the last team in the playoffs is at this moment and see how far behind them you are, and kind of see how many games you are behind the last playoff spot, and kind of use that as kind of a guideline or like a baseline to kind of see where you need to go to kind of, so to speak, save your season. Every year we see teams that are, under 500 are just sneak into the playoffs and then get hot at the right time and win leagues as the last playoff seed. Obviously, in fantasy football, all you have to do is even in NFL, obviously, but in fantasy football, all you have to do is find a way to get into the playoffs. And at that point, anything goes. So kind of use that as a baseline if your team is struggling. Obviously, it's probably easier if your team has 6 playoff spots versus, 4, let's say, to try to sneak in if your team is struggling. But, kind of use that as a baseline to see how far out of the playoffs you are, if you even are out of the playoffs, and kind of, gauge your team with the rest of your league, because, even though it is a long season, we're 7 weeks in, so you kind of, for the most part, you kind of know where your team is at this point in the year. So just kind of, take a step back, an objective look at kind of where your team stands, where you are, in comparison to where the playoffs is at, because, we have 6-7 more weeks left of the regular season for most fantasy leagues that, go through week 14. Don't make any panic trades, but also make moves if you need to, because, the trade deadline is also kind of approaching the next few weeks. That most leagues, have a trade deadline kind of week 10, 11, 12 in that range. But, all in all, remember that we're all competitive and want to win, but it is also fantasy football, and we can control, so much at the end of the day, and kind of just keep that in perspective, when you're looking at your teams.
I think it's very well put. It's very well put. I'll say
I think
this.
That is well put.
I had a team last year that was the 7th seed. It was a 20-man, 2-owner per team league, $1,900 payout. Don't ask me how I got involved in this, but
Jesus Christ.
But we were the 7th seed, and we ended up going all the way and beating the 8th seed in the championship last year. So there's an example for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I had a couple of years ago, it was the 2020 season, and I barely squeaked into the playoffs at 5-9. And we do still do trades throughout the playoffs, and I pulled this crazy trade. One would say it was stupid, but I wanted to do it. I wanted Stephon Diggs, and I traded away one of my star receivers, and I also traded away Tom Brady I traded for Tom Brady and Stephon Diggs, and I gave them the then MVP Aaron Rodgers. I wasn't going to do it. I was going to give away Tom Brady. Shoot, I've completely messed it up. I had Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Okay. And I was going to trade Tom Brady. I'm a Brady zealot, but Aaron Rodgers was having a better year. And this kid goes, well, by the way you're talking to me about Tom Brady, I would think that you think he's washed too. I didn't like that. So I traded away Aaron Rodgers. They got Stephon Diggs. And in the we eventually both made it to the playoffs. This kid was like top of the league. He only had 2 losses on the season. We met up in the championship. Tom Brady didn't only outscore Aaron Rodgers, but I was down 30. It was a Monday night football game with Stephon Diggs facing the New England Patriots without Stephon Gilmore. They had J.C. Jackson. He scored 41, and it won me the league in a walk-off. So that's kind of
it doesn't get much sweeter than that.
It was amazing. So Stephon Diggs, he's a hero. He's yeah. So I definitely get that, right? And it really does take just making the playoffs, because you really don't have much control over how these players do. I mean, some of them just catch fire, and next thing you know, you're just burning through the playoffs, and you take the championship by storm at 5-9. You know, so, and I didn't expect spot that season either, so that was just unbelievable. But yeah, that's a good point, right? Like, kind of just try to figure out a way to get into the postseason, because, you know, in fantasy football, that's kind of the way it ends up going. But yeah. All right. So I guess we don't have much to add on that.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. But yeah, that was a good guest segment. And so we'll move on to our final segment of the show, our Fumblerooski fan box. So we asked you guys, who's the most underrated defensive player so far this season? Lots of different answers. That's next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins. Sammy Watkins for the touchdown.
Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright, Chris Costich, special guest Ari Koslow. So we welcome you to the Fumblerooski fan box portion of our show, where we post a question filter on our Instagram every Monday, and you guys can respond with hot takes, questions, and more, and we will discuss it and give you a shout out on our podcast. Respond to next week's fan box question to be featured on our show. All right, so the question of the week was, who is the most underrated defensive player so far this season? We got some interesting answers, leading off with Owen Vanzlack, who said Bradley Chubb. And Bradley Chubb, ever since he's entered the league, has been a pretty good defender, which is weird because, like, he was a first rounder, and he also, when he was traded from the Broncos, he went for a first rounder. Yet he's still somehow underrated. So this kid can still clearly ball, but I mean, he's just still overlooked in the general fan populace.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. Bradley Chubb has always been a dog, in my opinion, and that was a huge thing for the Dolphins to pick him up. But I think just because of the hype of the Dolphins offense, he's kind of flown more under the radar. Yeah. Or really that whole entire defensive unit in general.
Yeah. This next one, so so forgive me for the pronunciation, Josie Jewell?
Yep, Josie Jewell.
Okay. This guy's actually been pretty good since entering the league, especially in the past couple of years, and he's on pace for over 100 tackles yet again as an off-ball linebacker. It's always the off-ball linebackers who are just, they're always forgotten. And there are some who are some of the best in the game, and you would barely even know who they are. Like this Aloakon guy. Holy crap. On the Jaguars, he is a tackling machine.
That's just one of those. That's just some of those guys that are just in the right spot every single time. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right. But if you're getting the tackles for loss, though, like Foye Aloakon, that guy he's getting tackles like it's nobody's business. It's unbelievable. All right. Grant Flood said Roy Robertson Harris. So our thoughts.
Shout out my boy Grant.
Yep. Brockton rocks, baby. What are you thinking?
I'm not overly familiar with Roy Robertson Harris. Is he a Jaguars guy?
I would assume so.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, because that's Grant's team.
All right. So looking at his statistics right now. All right. So he does have so far this season, 18 combined tackles, 11 assists, half a sack on the season. He doesn't have a season of more than 45 total tackles. So he's probably a rotational guy, I would assume. But he's been in the league for a couple of years. I believe he's been in the league since 2017. So he's probably just one of those I would say role players on the defense, right? He can make some plays, but he's not meant to be an everyday starter, which is underrated. Grayson Mortimer said Andrew Van Ginkel.
Van Ginkel.
What are our thoughts?
That's another one that I'm not entirely familiar with.
All right.
But that's
probably as well.
That's probably the same thing with Chubb in the sense of like that Miami team's just overshadowed, or that Miami defense just overshadowed by their offense.
Well, damn guys, these are some good picks if we have to research them. He has 4 sacks on the year, 31 combined tackles, 19 solo. 31. So he had 47 last year. And he's a linebacker. And he looks like he's been more of an on-ball, considering he hasn't really racked up too many tackles, but he gets the sacks. So pretty solid. Patrick Williver said Jesse Bates. This is a good one. He's one of the better safeties in football. He doesn't really get mentioned much. And it was an underrated loss. I mean, it was a big loss at the time for the Bengals, losing Jesse Bates and also Von Bell. Although they did do a great job of replacing him. You slide Dax Hill into a starting role, and then you bring in Nick Scott. They've done a good job on their defense overall, the Bengals. But it doesn't mean the Panthers. Panthers. I was thinking of Von Bell. Doesn't mean the Falcons didn't get a really good safety in Jesse Bates. But both sides win in this one because the Bengals did a good job at replacing him. Dax Hill's a pretty good safety. All right. Those are all our responses. Do you guys have any thoughts before we end the show tonight?
I guess one other underrated defensive player we could throw in there is Jabril Peppers. Yeah,
that's a good one. I did like that. I did like that pick when somebody responded with it. The only problem is I didn't mention it because it was spelled wrong. And now if it was spelled wrong, that means we post it and then we're posting Jarrell Peppers.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was just a typo. So no, just for all our fan box responders out there, please make sure you use good grammar, because if we shout you out and we post where you are spelling something wrong, it's a negative reflection on us. It makes our page look bad and unprofessional.
Couple stats I'll throw out for Jabril Peppers, though. Best run defender in the NFL right now with a 93.0 grade. His defensive grade in general, 91.3. Third in the NFL, best among safeties.
He was a first-round pick too, right? By the
he was by the Giants.
Giants or Browns?
I think he got drafted.
Giants.
Pretty
yes.
sure he got drafted by the Giants, and then he went to the Browns, and they weren't using him right.
Went to the Browns in that Odell Beckham Jr. trade.
Yeah, and they weren't using him right. So then, finally, now he's getting his flowers with the Patriots.
Right, because Bill Belichick is one of the best defensive minds of all time. That's one thing. That's one positive thing I will say about Belichick is that he is very, very good at getting the most out of his defenses. And part of the reason why I do not think they needed to take Christian Gonzalez in the first round, I think they would have found somebody somewhere, somehow, and they would have made it work. He's done it before. He's found J.C. Jackson. He's found Malcolm Butler. He's found Jack Jones. He found Asante Samuel, who was a fourth round pick himself. He's found Marcus Jones, who's been pretty solid. I think they would have been fine without it. They could have Jordan Addison on this roster, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
All right. We got to end the show here. Yeah, but Ari, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course. And Chris, it's always a pleasure. Be a
always
co-host.
a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Kirk Cousins isn't a top 10 quarterback.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I would be very
That'll
willing
do
to
it
let
for
this
us
show
tonight.
go
Thank you
another
for
half
listening
hour.
to us. We have new episodes out on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have all our episodes available on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and so much more. Also, be sure to follow our Instagram at Fumblerooski_podcast to keep up with our podcasts and latest coverage on the NFL. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Over and out.